Hello, everyone. Welcome to our boring enterprise Nerdletter discussion. It's as usual every 2 weeks. Myself, Elena Perfilieva, and Paul Moderman, my co-author, meet to discuss the upcoming issue of the Boring Enterprise Nerdletter. So the issue we are discussing today, this week we're slightly late for our discussion. We're recording it almost as we're ready to go to press, but nevertheless, everyone, all our YouTube subscribers will get an early preview of this recording on Tuesday before the Nerdletter goes out on Wednesday. All right. So, Paul, if you don't mind, I will just go ahead with my potential stories.
I do mind, but I hereby allow it.
All right. Thank you, my lord. All right. I will start sharing my stuff.
You may proceed.
Yeah. Thank you. Excellent. All right. So my first story in this issue will be around architecture. IT architecture has been on my mind lately quite a bit, and you can see on Twitter I have shared a funny video here, which is, by the way, completely true story. This was taken at the hotel I was staying in, and I think this is exactly when architects are needed. Specifically on SAP projects, so that they don't look like this video when your drawers don't really work well with your oven. And there was an interesting post on LinkedIn. So Paul Kurchin, who is a known SAP community evangelist, as he calls himself, he shared a post on SAP community about enterprise architects. But this was kind of my starting point of thought, and I want to expand this slightly to maybe talk a little bit about different architect varieties or flavors, because there is like enterprise architects and there is purely kind of technical architect, even solution architect. And I think there is a lot of maybe misunderstanding what each one of them do. And I don't pretend to have like the truth on this subject, but hopefully I can provide my perspective on it.
I'm excited to hear that, because here's the thing that I grew up at my first job out of college was at a huge company. And I worked in like IT, and I would every now and again, like little junior Paul would be in the presence of like some of the enterprise architects of this place, and to my eyes then, and maybe even now, I'm not sure, but to my eyes then, those people were talking about things that could not matter for like a decade at least.
Yeah.
To my ears, it was like, okay, well, assuming that the laws of thermodynamics still hold, we will still, have causality working in this direction, right? Like it was so like divorced from reality that I was like, how does what you're talking about now matter to whether we can post journal entries to the GL, right? So that kind of like, and there was a guy who wrote about it, Joel Spolsky, architecture astronauts, right? Who would spend so much time like thinking about things that were just like so out in the universe, crazy weird, that they do they actually matter. So curious to see whether that perspective is addressed in this stuff. I should just watch this video or read this blog article myself and see about that, because to me it always has felt like, where's the right place for architects to have that perspective?
Yeah, and I've always been kind of fascinated by the work of the actual like building architects, people who architect buildings we live in and we use, and I always thought, like, how is it different from IT architecture? Because the word architect is kind of the same, but at the same time, some of the really shoddy solutions we have seen in IT, there is no way, at least I hope, they would pass in the real world buildings. And I will have a couple of musings on this subject. I think the main difference is that like building architects, they first of all work with very specific like building codes and very specific guidelines. There is much less fuzziness than there is in IT world, where a lot of time is just very nebulous. And another aspect was interesting. I stumbled upon a discussion about how architects kind of calculate how much how much weight can building bear, etc. And I saw a response by an architect, and he said, well, when we design building, it's for example, there are multiple stories, so obviously second floor it needs to hold like however many people can there be, the weight of the floor itself, structure itself, any like furniture, whatever is reasonable. And his comment was, well, when we design, we have very specific kind of requirements, very specific number of people that we design for. And it is explicitly written in all their documents, because architects are kind of criminally liable for if anything happens with the building. So they obviously responsibility is much higher than for IT architects, even though I think IT architects can do quite a bit of damage as well. But thankfully most of the time IT failures are not as bad. But it's interesting, and he mentioned a couple of examples when I think we've all heard of those terrible stories when some tragedy happened, when some building collapsed. And he said in those cases, he had one specific example that I don't remember, but he said in that case, the customer explicitly disregarded architect's advice, and architect actually walked out from that design, and customer still went ahead and built it anyway with someone else. And they put so much more weight on the building than it was designed for. And it held for some time, but then eventually it collapsed. I wish we almost had kind of the same in IT as well, where we can be very clear what we design for and what it's never really meant to do. So yeah, some very, I hope, interesting observations. At least, I mean, for me, they're interesting, so I'm writing about it. All right. So
this subject could go on forever, because there's there's ways that architect analogy doesn't apply to IT. Right? Because think about this, like, they have all these rules, but like in IT, next year you can literally have like a server that can do twice as many things per second. Right? And oh man, I don't want to get bogged down by that, but it's that's crazy.
I think it's maybe another article, if not book, on that subject easily.
Let's write a book. Let's do it now.
Architecture should be bestseller. All right. So my next subject is I started with desire to kind of follow up on Devtoberfest sessions, and I dutifully went and listened to several of them that were around ABAP Rep. But unfortunately, I didn't really like any of them as much as to recommend them to the readers. So I took a bit of a turn at the last minute, and I thought that I would provide maybe like my summary of the recent S/4HANA 2022 release. There have been, obviously SAP announced the release itself. I mean, thankfully made it into 2022. It's like almost in November, but it's fine. There have been several blogs, and some of them, like this one, is highlights of the release in general, which I think is actually very good, especially for SAP. But I've noticed there was also like an influx, like a burst of blogs about this version, but what it means for developers. And there isn't anything like earth-shattering or anything like super new change, like for example, version 7.4 was in ABAP. But I've noticed there are several significant, I think, items that developers should kind of pay attention to. One of them is it's all about just cloud readiness. There is always some kind of like almost like a motto or something when SAP provides new releases. And before that, it was all like when HANA came about, it was like code push down. Now it's like called cloud readiness. So there are some posts that I want to highlight and just kind of just summarize my thoughts on this in general. So that will be my kind of technical and ABAP oriented piece.
Yeah, that's good. There's this space of this stuff, both S/4HANA Cloud and also the the ways and means of those code push down and enhancements and like that, it's still an active thing. Like it's still a thing that can change these days.
Yeah. There definitely have been like some shift in conversations, but not significant, but at the same time not notable, I think. All right, and my third piece, it will be again, I'm borrowing from Fireship, one of my favorite YouTube channels. I've noticed this video is coding is dead, or is it? So this is, again, there have been so many of those posts and videos and everything, like is programming dead? And we have heard the story since 1990s, and probably others have heard it earlier. I think someone was announcing death of development and programming every year. But I found this video particularly interesting because it actually looks at the specific trends that are active right now and how that can change the software development world potentially. So it's not, I would say, if I were to summarize my impression of this video, and these videos are always very condensed, so there is huge amount of information just squeezed into 8 minutes of video, which I absolutely love. So my impression overall is, I think that in enterprise world, we will have this kind of safe haven almost for developers for a very long time, because 90% of what he's talking here does not affect really SAP, or I would say maybe enterprise development, maybe at large, kind of at all. And there are actually some interesting comments down here in YouTube video, where I think many developers are also kind of skeptical whether any effect really there will be on development, even with all the low code, no code tools. And I saw that others are noting, well, it's not just about writing the code. Most of the job is really just understanding what the customers want and then transforming it into the code. Because if anyone could really very clearly tell, let's say, low code, no code tool what is necessary, then that's kind of half of development job is already done. But a lot of work happens really before that or after that. So it's code writing itself. I think that's definitely something that's going to be probably simplified. Maybe, I don't know, lots of tools just to make very mundane and mechanical work easier. But I think software development as profession definitely not going anywhere. And so I think or is it part is correct. But I thought it was really interesting video because it was very pragmatical. It was done not by some kind of sensationalist, marketologist that is selling low-code solutions, but by a real developer who clearly very experienced. And I just found his observations very interesting. All right, so that's
okay. So I have one thought about this thing real quick here, and that is, okay, so because I saw a number, it was in one of those prediction things. Where did I see that? It might have been one of the prediction things I wrote about last time. I have a hard time remembering what I write about in these. I just have terrible memory.
That's okay.
But so right now, and especially before now, but up until now, kind of the act the act of writing code and the act of making an app are essentially one and the same, right? I think one of the big bifurcations coming, and is here kind of, is that it will be more and more possible for people who want to make an app to not have to write code to do so. In other words, we'll have this roughly the same need for people who can write code. But if the goal is to make an app that is roughly useful, that is the part of the balloon that I think is expanding, right?
Yeah.
I think that is the thing that is becoming easier and easier, is the I need to share this with like 5 of my friends, a little app that records our D&D like monster killing things, right? That thing is going to be more and more achievable every single day from here on out without a single line of code written by a human. just like describing whatever, right? So what I'm not saying is, the people who write code go to the tar pits and just jump in, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that like code writing and app creation are going to start to like move slightly apart a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my sort of fuzzy prediction on that stuff. Anyway, super wise. I know, right? Wow, what a great prediction. Anyway, yeah. So let's jump to my stuff.
All right. Yeah. So that's all for me.
So
And
I have I think 5 things that I'll have to whittle down to 3, just like usual. So one is I don't have it up because it's not based on any writing that's out there right now. It's just I just want to do my like, what are my top 3 like junior developer things I wish I had done myself as a junior dev. Like, because it's like, I mean, we've all seen those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
And I've had some people, some relatively younger and relatively fresher people start at my company, and like I'm seeing a lot of things where like, honestly, the interesting thing is it doesn't, like, my reflection on this does not come from watching these people do things badly. It comes from watching these people do things in comparison to what I did when I was in that state. In other words, the people I see these days are like 10 times better than my reflection of myself at that age and experience level, right? And so I want to kind of call that out in a positive way and also offer some kind of advice. So I'll have like 3 or 4 top like tips / reflections on like being a good fresh junior developer, because like, man, these people, like, and I'm not even full of crap here. Like, these people are doing, they're smarter, and they have their stuff together in ways that is so far beyond what I was as like little newbie junior Paul, like failing at things all over the place guy, right? And it's amazing. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to sort of write about, is that angle there. So like I said, I have 3 or 4 points about that. But let me share my app here.
Maybe post a picture of little Paul.
Little junior Paul.
Would be super curious.
The funny thing is that the only difference would be the beard would not be gray.
Oh,
because little junior Paul was already bald, right? So, and little junior Paul still had like a beard and everything.
Goodness.
So it would just be like a brown beard instead of like a gray chin kind of thing,
Yeah.
Anyway, so okay, so this is another thing I wanted to write about. SAP announced their Q3 results, and their cloud revenue is up 38%. I want to dive in on this stuff because like SAP, I mean, obviously SAP for both you and me is like our kind of our baby, our bread and butter.
Yeah.
And anything cloud-wise in SAP is, again, fascinating to me in so many ways, because like growing up inside SAP, like I just learned to think of it differently than anything to do with cloud. And so every cloud motion, every cloud angle that attaches to SAP, I have to like incorporate into my big, architecture of the building that I have constructed in my head of what SAP is. And so SAP obviously wants to change that. And it, like, from the outside, it seems like they're succeeding at that change, right? But I want to kind of look at more some of the details here. I always use Bob Evans' acceleration economy stuff, because I love this guy's analysis stuff. He pays attention to all of the Q3 or all of the quarterly earnings reports from all the big tech people, and gives like deeper things that I'm always curious to find out. So I'll highlight a couple things there, and then also kind of try to understand some more of my question marks around that stuff. It's because there was another. I don't think it's in here, but if you if you go read, excuse me, if you go read the earnings report, there's one or two numbers that I didn't quite understand. So I'll just bring those to light and say, hey, does anybody know about this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think some of the SAP pundits of yesteryears used to poke holes in some of the SAP kind of reporting, and yeah, kind of questioning how much of that actual sales or actual used products or shelfware or just some kind of inflated license figure show. So I don't know. I don't like particularly care about SAP revenue, but obviously I care what it means for us technology wise. Because every time it feels like there are some conflicting kind of information coming through, like that DSEG survey that we have just written about recently. If you
Yeah.
look at it, then there is still huge significance for the on-premise world, and that's what we
Yeah.
see in our daily lives as well. But then every time some revenue report comes in, it's like, oh my God, our cloud revenue is, I don't know, up, but I don't know what does it mean in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there is always some accounting that can be, I guess, interpreted in different ways, if you will. Right.
Okay, so there's that. There's also, I saw this go by at Diginomica, and I wanted to kind of poke it a little bit because this is Avantra, which is it's about Avantra. It's about companies finding way through the automation paradox. And I honestly don't know what the automation paradox is necessarily right now. But as soon as I saw the title, it struck me as, in context of all of the stuff, like, just imagine basically everything tech in the universe is like tied to a balloon that wants to sort of float up into the cloud. What does Avantra see as the future for themselves in the world where everything wants to go to the cloud? Right? I'd be curious to know, because a lot of that's the way I sort of naively view that stuff as like automating the logs and like sending out error messages when there's a short dump in an op system, and like making sure database servers get restarted and whatever, I don't know, whatever operational things that the automation stuff does there. Like, what does that mean if customers start to leave their own hosted solutions for like pure cloud SaaS stuff, right? What does Avantra see as its future in that universe? Whether this piece addresses that, I don't know. so I may be barking at nothing here, but that it kind of sparked my question in my head. So this one might be something that I don't write about this time, and I save for another thing in the future if it turns out this doesn't really help my question. So who knows?
Yeah, we overlap with John a little bit, I think, in SAP Mentors of in several years ago. And to be honest, I don't know what the Avantra does exactly. I never really checked much, but what I remember, and I saw that this article is not actually written by John himself, but I remember he always posted very knowledgeable, very good blogs about any SAP news, because every time SAP would come up with some grand announcement, everyone would be like, John, please explain to us what
that is.
What does it mean exactly? Please tell us. So I think it's a gain for Avantra, but I feel it's a loss for larger SAP community that it doesn't seem to write anymore. So John, if you're watching, please write something sometimes.
John, if you're which would be great. John, if you're watching, just digitally reach out and slap me on the head or whatever and tell me what's up. Because by the way, he wrote, I'm sure you knew this, he wrote one of the great Rise explainers.
Yeah, exactly.
That was great. It was
the only Rise explainer, really.
Yeah. And it's probably aged out of relevance now because it's probably something different anyway. But like, I have to go back and read it again. But anyway, yeah. So again, like I said, my question in my head might be completely different than what is being addressed here. So I might save this for a later issue or whatever. But it popped up. Yeah. This one is same kind of thing. So enterprises thinking SaaS first, not cloud first. So
what does it mean?
So yeah, because there's like, so when you think of cloud in general, the cloud model has always kind of been roughly at the core level, at the basic level, when cloud first became a thing, cloud infrastructure was the thing, right? I can rent a server from a giant pile of servers in AWS. And then after kind of getting that going, up and going, along came the platform stuff, like storage and databases and things like that, right? Where you didn't rent a server, you just said, give me storage and I will put things in it. And then I will pay for how much storage I use. Or give me a database and I will put things in it and I will pay for how many queries I do against it, that kind of stuff, right? And platform things like that. And at the very top level of that sort of chain is the SaaS level, which is just give me an application and I will pay you when I use the application. I don't care about any of the other bits that go underneath it, right? Enterprises obviously have an incredible mix of all of those things when they all kind of come together and to make all of their stuff work, right? I think a lot of places even now are still kind of making maybe a little bit of a mistake of like just forklifting their on-premises stuff into like infrastructure stuff in a cloud and then not really changing how they think about that stuff versus the platform and SaaS stuff. But also when we talk about, especially when we talk about some of these low-code, no-code solutions and the things that they unlock, there's even more layers than infra, platform, and SaaS. There's like intermediate spaces in between there that are kind of made available by various things that are going on. So it's like it's a more complex world than just should I buy SaaS or not. It's almost more like how does what I'm buying fit into my spaghetti bowl of what I already have? You know what I mean? I don't know how else to say it. Like it's more complex than thinking, you know what, this guy's right, SaaS first, right? Again, I don't know what's going on here. This might be, again, maybe a little bit of nothing in terms of what I'm thinking versus what this guy is writing about, or what this author is writing about, Mark Samuels. But I'm curious to see what's going on there. So this one also might not make the cut for this issue, but will be super relevant in terms of some of my thinking going forward in this stuff too. But the one that I do really want to make sure I write about this time is having smell-o-vision in VR. So some new research out there making it possible to smell in VR environments. So everybody buying your Meta Quest Pro headsets, get ready to also buy your Meta Smell Pro tubes.
No, this is very Futurama like.
Yeah.
Because they had smelloscope, and it was hilarious.
Yeah, but I do definitely want to write about this because I mean it's the like smelling, whether it's smelling or hearing or whatever aside, it is like VR still needs more juice to it for it to become a thing. You know what I mean? It still needs more than what it is, at least a thing that like everybody does. Because like it's a thing enough now where like somewhere behind me is my like Quest game thing, and I like doing the game stuff for like an hour, and then there's some other stuff. But like for it to be a thing that people do business with, that people live their lives with, it's not there yet. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe smell isn't the right thing to get it there. I don't know. Probably not. But but what is, and then what, and especially in terms of the VR that's kind of being put out there now, the Meta Quest Pro, especially that kind of stuff, about kind of having almost an enterprise play for it. Like where does that fit into the smelling or the other senses piece of it, right? All that stuff is...
Yeah, and like immediately have an idea, maybe like in training or something, because I used to work at a company that did manufacturing, and there was a mandatory training like company-wide, whether you worked on the shop floor or in IT or in accounting, you had to take the same like dangerous goods training.
Oh, yeah.
And one part of it was like, for example, how to sense like if there is like chemical spills, or so the whole part about all those dangerous goods and chemicals, etc. And smell would be quite a bit of it, I think,
Mm-hmm.
at least in some cases. So I'm
Mhm.
guessing maybe for some kind of training purposes, that actually could be very, very interesting use case for for enterprise world. That's just something that immediately
Yeah, I mean, hey, like,
sprouted in my
what
mind.
does it feel like to have your
Yeah.
hand smashed by the machine?
Yeah,
Try it out in VR. No, I'm kidding.
yeah.
But I mean, but you make a valid point, is that like maybe there is some dimensionality to it that kind of fits the stuff,
Yeah.
So like whatever it is, whether it's smell or not, VR still needs more of that stuff, I
Yeah.
think, to kind of land
Or
eventually.
you know another use case for the people who, I mean, I work from home now, so it's not a problem, but in the office, for the people who bring like smelly food and microwave it in the office, I would just as a punishment would just let them sit there and smell this stuff like forever, because it was always super annoying at
It's
the
funny.
office.
That's funny. That's good stuff. Anyway, so those are the excuse me, those are the five or six things I'm thinking of.
Paul
And
is
I'll have it.
super excited about
I,
his stories.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. Viewers have been battling something.
Yeah.
So I'll have it by the time we get our letter out there. I'll have it down to 3, and we'll have it out there into the universe.
Awesome. Smelloscope, here we come. All right. So these are our how many? I don't know how many, like eight stories roughly, and 6 out of them you totally can expect to see this upcoming Wednesday. And yeah, please Paul, get better soon, and watch us on YouTube and read us in review on Wednesday, and like and subscribe as usual. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye everyone.